Hey, soccer fans, welcome once again to the Sons of a Pitch, an American Soccer Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Pateris, joined by my good friend and fellow host, Mike Guglielmi. Mike, we're a month from the MLS being suspended. Are you surviving? Are you going through withdrawals? Do we need to send a welfare check to the house?
It's getting close. I'm having a hard time now. It's actually starting to set in now. Like the first couple weeks, it was fine. I'm like, oh yeah, no big deal. 30 days, we'll get through this. Will be a nice little break. Maybe I can meet my family. Somebody told me I had 4 kids. It'll be cool. And then now it's been the 30 days, and we're nowhere near. They're actually talking about August or September now before sports, comes back, and I'm getting really close to the edge here, Nick.
Well, we'll use tonight as a welcome distraction to pull you back from the edge. Then I am drinking a little scotch tonight because we're talking about some legal issues, and I figured as the lawyer in the room, I needed to have some scotch on hand for our discussion
Cheers.
tonight. Cheers, my friend. Cheers. So, with that, ladies, gentlemen, boys, and girls of all ages, viewers and listeners, we thank you for joining us once again. If you want to join the conversations that we have, send us your questions, send us your comments. Please follow us along on Twitter at SOP Soccer, on YouTube at Sons of a Pitch Soccer, on Facebook. Also, we have swag available. Look at the beautiful shirt that Mike is wearing there, and maybe you'll get to see him sip from his Sons of a Pitch mug on occasion. You can find all of that on Redbubble. Additionally, we are expanding the YouTube content once the season kicks back up, once the weather kicks back up, and we can get outside and do some other soccer-related videos. So if you would like to have your business sponsor our YouTube channel, please reach out to us via email, podcast at sonsofapitchsoccer.com, or direct message on Twitter. Additionally, we want to let everyone know a little programming update. We have been in contact with a newer podcast, the Sacktown FC podcast, covering Sacramento. And we are going to get together with them, do an interview later this week, and release that and let you know what's going on out in California, out with Sacramento, and get some insight into the newest expansion franchise in the MLS. Mike, any other announcements or anything you want to tell the people before we dive into our content tonight?
No, thanks for joining. Let's get right into our content here and start talking about some of the news that's happening, even though there's not much.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that interested me, and I appreciate you bringing it to my attention, me being the lawyer here, as we all know, that a number of players from the United States women's national team have filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation under equal pay, gender discrimination, claims that they are being paid less, that they're being provided subpar travel arrangements, both in travel and accommodations, hotels, things of that nature. They're not given access to the same doctors and medical personnel. They went through the entire arbitration process. They went through the EEOC, unable to come to an agreement, and now they've already gone through the pleadings and the motion stages, and they're getting ready for trial. But what was interesting is that the United States Soccer Federation just switched law firms after an embarrassment where the prior law firm. I'm sorry, you're shaking your head at me. Why are you shaking your head here, Mike?
Because the whole thing is just so screwed up.
Oh, I thought I stuck my foot in my mouth or made a faux pas on the level of the U.S. Soccer Federation here.
I saw the headline come across my phone that the old law firm is out. Apparently, they requested to be out. I find that very hard to believe. I think they were forced out, and now this new law firm is in. The whole thing. Look back at our last episode. We talked a little bit. It was the last one or the one before that when Cordero resigned. We kind of got into it a little bit on this issue. Just crazy how this whole thing is being handled. It is a complete mess right from the get-go. And anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt your thoughts there, Mr. Lawyer.
Not
but
at all.
To jump back in, I can't help myself from showing.
Well, again, so the law firm of Seifert Shaw is out, and the law firm of Latham and Watkins is in. Now, these are like international, multi-state type of law firms. Who it was surprising that Seifert Shaw actually wrote in the brief that it takes less skill to be a women's player than it does to be a men's player. But this, I actually went back and read their brief, And it might fall under the category of a good legal argument, but a terrible factual argument and just a bad PR move. Really, what they were trying to get at is, and again, this isn't me advocating myself. This is just me interpreting their brief. I think what they were trying to get at was, in order for a male soccer player to make it on the U.S. national team, and then to have the U.S. national team qualify for the World Cup, it requires a more difficult path. And the reason is, women's national team has contracts. There are a certain number of guaranteed contracts for these women, such as Alex Morgan, the lead plaintiff in the case. She's got a guaranteed contract with the U.S. with U.S. Soccer, whether or not she makes the national team or doesn't. The men don't have that. They have to make the squad if they want to get the bonuses. Additionally, their qualifications to make Gold Cup, World Cup, all of those sort of things, the argument is that it's more difficult than the women to qualify because there may be only 8 or so really competitive women's squads in the world versus 30 some of the men's squads. Now, that's the argument that was being made. I don't agree with it, but I guess I can see where they're coming from. And then they just throw that sentence in there where it takes a lot more skill to be a male soccer player. That was their summary of it. Totally screw that up. What's worse is Cordero came out and said, I never read it. Then Vice President Parlo Cohn, who's now the president, came out and said, well, I never read it either. So who signed the brief? Who signed off on it? Is this law firm acting totally without any oversight or discretion? That's the first failing in my mind. Like, how do you have this giant lawsuit, both in PR and in financial implications, and your top 2 executives don't even read the submissions? Mike, I'm totally lost by this.
No, it's nuts. I mean, you have to. This is you're basically dealing with an issue of your own employees. And a large portion of your own employees, like half of them, technically. I mean, what? This makes no sense. How do they not read it? The only thing I want to add to your part of saying, the way the brief was written out and whatnot, from what I took of it as well, being a numbers guy and an accountant, is statistically, it is a little bit harder to make the men's national team than it is the women's national team, just based off of the number of players out there. Right, so you have more competition for the men's spots than you do for the women's spots. And that's probably part of the reason why an Alex Morgan, who can be on a contract with the U.S. Soccer Federation, because there's no way she's going to lose her spot. She's the face of the organization, kind of like a Christian Pulisic. Yeah. He could probably get there too, but she's going to be there regardless. There's less competition as far as strict numbers go, but it still doesn't. There's still a large enough amount of competition to make that argument kind of null and void, just because you have, it's not like there's 8 million men's soccer players and there's, 25 women's soccer players, right? There's still, 8 million men players and 4 or 5 million women players. So yes,
at some point it's insignificant.
Right. That kind of factors into it as well. But I mean, the fact that none of these people even read the brief and come out and say that, I mean, how disgusting that just shows me. And I don't know how you felt throughout your career, Nick, but in my career, I'm always like, you know what? I know I can do well myself. I know that I will be a successful employee because I pay attention to detail. I go above and beyond. And 99% of people out there are really freaking stupid. They're not going to pay attention to it. Like something like this. How does the guy who just got elected president of this federation, who's the leader of this federation, not even read the biggest issue going on right now with his company, federation, right, whatever you want to call it? That's just ridiculous. And that's because people are stupid. And obviously, Carlos Cordero is pretty friggin' stupid. As well as, I hate to say it, but this Parlo Cohn, even as VP, she should have been reading it. The fact that they went on and picked her as the successor to him in the interim, even, however they're going to work that out, whether it's another election or hire somebody else. For somebody else that said that, I would never, if I was on the board of directors, I would never vote for that person regardless. If you're involved in that organization in a high level, in an executive level, you should have been aware of what was going on. You should have immediately been red flagged and say, whoa, wait a minute, this is stupid. Hold up, wait a minute, wait a minute, take a look at this. I'm an adjuster on different lawsuits and things like that. I'm the lowest guy in the totem pole, but everything that's put forward in that lawsuit is under my name. I read that with a fine-tooth comb, and I go after every single thing. And I tell the lawyers that are involved, they say, hey, listen, no, this doesn't sound right. This, you need to change this way. And we'll get on the phone and we'll talk about it, and we'll discuss how to make those changes, because I'm the one that's signing off on this. I'm not changing it. The fact that this is getting slipped up like that is just ridiculous, especially when the whole oversight of the entire case is ridiculous. It's not going to make or break the U.S. Federation. That's why it's so ridiculous from that standpoint. Why are we fighting our own employees, the most successful employees? Right. I don't know, the men haven't won any World Cups. The men haven't, the men aren't dominating the world like the women are. Why the hell are you fighting them over, a little bit difference of a pay issue? Just do it, sweep it under the rug, whether you agree with it or not, and move on. Because from a business standpoint, it's ridiculous. So
on the one hand, this is the perfect time for the women to get ready for trial because of how successful they've been in comparison to the men. But here's the interesting thing too, Mike. There's two issues that I want to cover. One has to do with collective bargaining, and the other has to do with the actual dollar-to-dollar comparison. So when they were looking and saying, well, the men were making that much more than the women, that was like a snapshot in the moment, because you had the women who just won the World Cup and the men who didn't qualify. So obviously the income levels are not your typical income levels. Typically the men will qualify and hopefully get out of the group stage. They will do well in Gold Cups. They will do well in other international showings. They'll play, I don't know how many, 8, 10 international friendlies in a non-World Cup year, something like that. Whereas the women don't have as many of those friendlies, but the year they won the World Cup, they got all that extra World Cup money. So it was perfect for them that they're at their peak of popularity and success, but it also worked against them from a numbers game, because over the last year or two, they were actually making more comparable to the men just because of how successful they were and how terrible the men have been in the last couple years, which you're hearing a lot of people say. And like you said, Mike, you're a numbers guy. Let's look at the numbers. Yeah, you're going to hear from Alex Morgan. She's pregnant. If she's, in labor, she might not testify, but you're going to hear from her. Hopefully you're going to hear from other members of the team, and you may hear from members of the U.S. Soccer Federation, but mostly the witnesses are going to be your economics experts and your money guys and your bookkeepers, who are going to be able to break it down and skew things towards their side of the argument.
Right.
And that is what really could sway a judge or a jury in these type of arguments here, is who's the best witness. I've seen it in car accident cases. I've seen it in medical malpractice cases. I've seen it in foreclosure cases, and I don't think it's any different in an employment case for U.S. Soccer. Whoever's got the best, most credible, and reasonable witnesses, usually they're going to walk away with the ruling in their favor.
Right. And then that's what it's going to come down to. Who can sway the numbers the best in their favor, or it gets thrown out, which I'm surprised it hasn't been thrown out already, honestly, just based off of kind of the mess that it's become. A judge just being like, you know what, this is ridiculous. Why is this even here? Mediate, figure this out, people. I don't know.
Well, nothing drives a settlement like a trial date. And right now the trial is set for May 5th, 2020. Couple things could push that back. Hey, maybe if Alex Morgan is unavailable, the plaintiff side of things asks for a continuance so she can appear, or maybe they do a video conference. Maybe the courts are still closed due to the pandemic. But here's the other interesting thing about the change in United States Soccer Federation law firms. It could be a delay tactic, either to drum up some sort of hidden, game changer in their favor, or give them more time to negotiate, bargain, and settle the case, because they don't want this to go to trial. This is going to be nothing but terrible for them. Even if they win the case, they lose face. And
Right.
maybe that's my Johnny Cochran. You win the case, but you lose face type of rhyme
Yeah.
that I can come up with there.
Yeah. There's a business decision to be made, and that's where exactly what you're saying. You can they possibly might win this case. Yes, based off of the merits and the way the law is written, they might win this case. But what will be what's the business case here, right? I mean, I deal with it all the time in claims. If we're if we've got something that we're covered liability wise, 3 weeks through Sunday, but the fact that the optics look bad, the fact that if something went somewhere else, it could be ugly, that,
Right.
there's a business decision to be made that says, hey, you know what, we're talking about $1,000 here, which could really affect the business, by 250,000 to 500,000 to $1 million to $10 million down the road. Is
Mm-hmm.
it better off getting rid of it now, even when you have the liability side of it, rather than getting dragged through the mud for 6 months? It's just a business decision as well. And that's been my whole
Right.
standpoint, because where I stand personally on this issue, is ridiculous that this is even going on. Pay them, be done with it, and move on. They
Agreed.
they are half of your organization, the women's team and the men's team. That's it. Now, obviously, maybe there's more. I don't know what the youth systems look like, as far as the
Right.
men's go down to, like, they probably have these like residencies down to like U10. Do they have that for girls? Is it only down to U15 for girls? Is it only U13?
I don't
So
know.
when you get crazy with percentages, is it maybe 60% men to 40% women as far as the business goes? I don't know, but that's just getting stupid. The bottom line is the senior teams, you got a men's senior team and a women's senior team. That's two. One out of two is 50%. It's 50% of your business. Take care of them. Keep your employees happy. And let them go win some more World Cups and keep on selling that damn merchandise and growing the sport of soccer in the United States. Because I don't care if I mean, it's women, it's men, it's dads, it's teenage boys that are excited about. They see the women winning the World Cup, they get excited.
Right.
I mean, there's probably, some of these guys that are like, yeah, the women are way better, because the men, what do they do? I haven't seen them play in forever. They don't watch the friendlies on Fox Sports 2 against Guyana, right? They're watching, they're watching the women's team in the World Cup, and try and win the championship. So just from my standpoint, get it over with, get it done, take care of them, and move on.
Right.
Eat the loss. I get it. When you're far into something, you don't want to eat it. Just eat it and move on.
Right. The one last thing to close that point out, if they are just looking to delay or maybe get some more time to negotiate, expect the new law firm of Latham and Watkins to file a brief to extend the trial date or a motion to extend the trial date, and just say, look, we substituted in 1 month before trial. That is not enough time for us to prepare for such
Right.
a massive undertaking that has been years in the making. So, Judge, if you can give us another 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, please let us do that. And then we'll come back for periodic status hearings and we'll update you on what's going on with settlement discussions. But don't be surprised if you see them try to motion to continue the trial. Also, you mentioned before that the old law firm of Seifert Shaw had requested to leave. Well, they have to do that. They have to file a motion to withdraw as counsel. So, yeah,
Okay.
USSF fired them probably, and they had to go
Right.
file their motion to withdraw to make it all official, like with the court.
Yeah.
The one other thing where when I read U.S. Soccer's brief, and I couldn't find a copy of the women's brief, the one thing that stood out to me where it could really turn the trial in their favor is their first argument. You always lead with your strongest argument. At least good lawyers do. Starting to question how this was written. But you lead with your strongest argument. And in that case, they said this
Okay.
is a collectively bargained for agreement. The reason there is any sort of disparity, which we still argue there isn't a disparity, the reason there's a disparity is because the men's team has a union, the women's team has a union, and we negotiated separate contracts with their unions. I think that is the strongest argument, and it may win them the case. Hey, we negotiated with the men, and they don't have any contracts. If they don't make the team, they don't get paid for any of this stuff. Women's team, You had your union, we negotiated with you, everything was agreed to, and you know what? We've guaranteed contracts. 17 of your players are going to get $100,000 a year, and then everyone else is on a tiered structure for how much they actually get to play and participate. You bargained for it, you got it, and now you want to say that it's unfair? Can't do that. The court has no jurisdiction in matters of business, and this was purely a business agreement. So, Mike, I think that's their strongest argument. How would you, either as a fan or as a potential juror, or say, hey, put on your judge's robe here, Judge Mike, if you heard that argument, how would you feel about ruling?
I think it's definitely an argument that can be looked into, and the details could be figured out. But it's still not much of a, that's on the management side of them. They should have negotiated a stronger position to say, unfortunately, we're only going to do business with one union, so you guys better figure it out. Get together with the men's union and let's work out a massive contract here. I mean, that could have been. There's so many different options, so it's hard to rule directly on that. But from a legal standpoint, the way the law's written, I don't know if there's some previous case law that states certain cases that are two different unions. They you settle with the with the one. I don't understand how that how that all would play out.
Sure.
But overall, again, if I was judge, looking at what I've seen so far, it's a very simple case to rule on, and that is pay the women. To hell with you, USSF, and let's move forward.
There you go.
So that's my ruling.
So if you were the judge Mike over here, that means you would give the women what they're asking for, which is $66.7 million in back pay, huge chunk of change, plus punitive damages. Now, punitive damages is exactly what it sounds like. It punishes the bad actor and serves as a warning to future bad actors. What punitive damage does, though, it's a multiplier. So you're looking, again, at a $67 million award,
right?
And then at least double it or triple it for the punitive damages. And then if the U.S. women's team attorneys ask for lawyers' fees, which of course they will,
right?
That's going to be a lot of money. And it's going to, again, even if the judge rules in favor of the women's players, you're still going to have all the economists on U.S. soccer side say, okay, well, judge, even if you do rule in their favor, it's not 67 million. It's more like a much lower number, blah, 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 blah. So
right.
it's going to be really interesting.
How long back are we talking? What are those figures based off of when you're talking to $66 million? I mean, is that per employee? Is that for the whole? And that goes back to somebody who had one cap with the team 10 years ago. I mean, what exactly does that break down?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what that is, but there are, how many? There's 20-some, I think, named plaintiffs in the class for the women's soccer team. So you have, it's got to be at least those players. Now, if you remember, Hope Solo initially wanted to join the class for this class action, but was denied because she had already retired from international play. Like, she had no future stake in the case. So
okay.
there are certain criteria that they're going to be looking for to see how they can award this money. But it's going to be just, for the named plaintiffs. I don't think they're taking into account any other future women national team players or any past women national team players into the equation.
Okay, so this is what's kind of hard, right? When you say, okay, well, if you're the judge, personally, I don't believe in punitive damages. That's just not my thing. Like, I don't think that really exists. It is what it is in the world. It happened to you. Move on. Let's move forward. Do you want this rectified in the future? Do you want your salary to be, if you're making $1 million now, $5 million a year after that? Let's talk about that. So I agree that there's some past and the punitive damages. Oh, well, my feelings are hurt because I'm a women's player and my pay wasn't as good as the men's. That I don't buy that. Let's move forward. Let's get ahead. I'm not, so personally, I don't buy in that, but I don't know how that plays into punitive damages as a judge or anything like that.
Well,
and
there's
so it's probably
a lot
a good
of
thing I'm
reasons
not a judge
for punitive. Yeah. there's a lot of reasons for punitive damages to be awarded, and they have to be in the statute. And before we get too legal on it, I'll just say quickly, the reason it's there is to give people the encouragement to do it. Because if you had to, pay your own attorney's fees and then just get awarded whatever settlement there is, like that might not be enough motivation for people. So they tack on the punitive damages, again, to punish bad actors and to also act as further incentive for people to bring these kind of lawsuits. So those kind of everything that I had gone over and my thoughts on it. There's a lot of great coverage on ESPN.com and Sports Illustrated, not to mention the plethora of soccer sites out there. I know I read a lot of what Kelly Cohen, Jeff Carlisle, and Grant Wall were writing, so thanks to all of them for putting out these articles. I don't know, Mike, was there anything else you wanted to comment on as far as the women's lawsuit in U.S. soccer?
Let's get on with this. This is ugly for U.S. soccer. We should be focusing on qualifying for the next World Cup and how the women are going to dominate the next World Cup. Let's focus on soccer. We're a soccer federation. Let's get over the whole we didn't pay you enough BS from both sides, and let's get on with the actual goal here is soccer. Maybe that's because I'm dying here. I need soccer in my life. I need sports in my life. I can't watch any more replays.
It's not just about the pay. It's about all the other benefits that the men have that the women don't. The medical access, the travel, the accommodations, all that other stuff. So it's not just about the money. But yeah, that it when you tag a $67 million price tag on it, it does kind of become about the money.
It's about the money. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Great. Well, speaking of the World Cup, we're going to quick cover a new headline, and then we'll take a break. There was an article from ESPN that came out today that U.S. prosecutors have now alleged more illegal bribes leading to the 2022 World Cup vote. Right, breaking news here. As it turns out, let's see if we can get their names here. Nicolas Leoz, at the time president of the South American Federation, former Brazil Federation president Ricardo Teixeira, let's see, Jack Warner, president of CONCACAF at the time, Rafael Salguero, the Guatemala Federation president, plus dozens of others throughout the Western Hemisphere of soccer were given bribes to vote for Qatar in 2022. And then, here's even more shocking, Mike, right? I hope you're sitting down right now. Several Fox executives, Fox TV executives, and their various companies have been indicted as well because, shocker, somehow Fox got the rights to the World Cup without having a bidding process.
I didn't think anybody else was bidding on the World Cup.
Right? Nobody wants to televise the World Cup in the U.S., just Fox?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shocker there. So we've got all this going on. And again, from the lawyer's perspective, it's cool to see how the prosecutors went after them because these bad actors, these criminals, essentially, they set up shell corporations here in the United States. They used the United States banking system, wire transfers, the mail. That is how we ended up getting jurisdiction and going after everyone. Do you think it's a little bit of sour grapes that the U.S. didn't get the World Cup, so that's why they're going after all these people?
No, because we got 2026. It's obviously it was corrupt as hell. I mean, call it out when you see it. There was corruption there. Qatar. I mean, the country is the size of like my pinky toe. It should not get a World Cup, okay? I mean, it was obviously some big oil money that was involved, bribing people to vote a certain way, bribing the leaders to push their people the certain way. It's clear as day that that's what happened. Now, should it be taken away? Part of me says yes, because the way it was so damn corrupt, and we're talking about changing it from a summer World Cup to a winter World Cup because of the heat and all that crap. Listen to me, you're not going to go and rework the number one tournament in the world. Look, you could have football fans here in the U.S. talk about the Super Bowl, the NFL playoffs, and that's like the greatest thing in the world. No, it doesn't hold a candle to the World Cup. The World Cup is the biggest event in the world, period. I mean, rework it, get rid of it, get rid of Qatar. Let's move forward and create a new host for 2022.
Yeah,
It doesn't. I mean, you have enough countries in the world, like in England, like Spain, like in Italy, like a United States, like a. I mean, you can name all of these different places that have. I
sure.
mean, fucking Portugal has enough stadiums to host a World Cup.
Right?
Now, let's not play, England against Argentina in a 25,000 seat stadium, but now with the coronavirus and all this crap, and I mean, it's going to take a while for people to go back to sitting in a 75,000 seat stadium with 74,998 other people, so you put it into a place where your bigger games get the bigger stadiums and so on and so forth, move forward. It's obvious there was corruption there. You have United States federal investigators on you. I'm sure other world entities are helping out with that.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of it. But it doesn't surprise me one bit. There was mass corruption with that. The fact that a place like Qatar got the 2022 World Cup.
Yeah. It's interesting how you try to compare it a little to the NFL, because I thought that might be a good comparison. So the Super Bowl is only ever hosted in cities that have really nice weather or good weather and a dome, because they want the best field conditions for the game. You are never going to see the Super Bowl played in Soldier Field. Stadium's too small, and it's an outdoor stadium on a lakefront in the middle of January in Chicago or February. Right. Never gonna happen. So you just take the opposite weather. Why would you want to play the Super Bowl in August in the middle, say if Phoenix hosted it, if it was down in Arizona or Texas,
without a dome stadium.
Without a dome, right? You're never going to want to see that. Same thing here. You don't want these games in Qatar, which is why they're going to. It was poorly thought out. Obvious, another sign that there was bribery and no one cared. Is just throw the money around. We'll give it to Qatar. I think they do try to rotate around certain federations.
Right.
So it was, the Asian Federation, North American Federation were kind of in the mix for it. But yeah, it was pretty obvious that this was this bid was bought and not won over by the Qatari designation. So with that, fans, listeners, viewers, let us know what you think. Comment on the YouTube video. Shoot us a message on Twitter at SOP Soccer. Are you going to even watch these games, or are we going to end up having to record them? Like, how do you feel about Qatar getting it, and how do you feel about the U.S. being the kind of the first country to go after these bribes? This is just the way business has been done. I mean, living in the Chicago area, it's nothing new to us, but U.S. is going after them. We will not let our banking system and our corporate structures be used to commit fraud and bribery. So there you go. Yeah, right. Well, with that, we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side, we're going to review an MLS expansion history, all the teams that have come into the league as expansion teams, and a little look towards the future. So stay tuned.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back to talk some MLS expansion, the old days from 96 forward to possibly some future expansion as well. Thanks again to our sponsors, Donovan Food Brokerage and Nice Premium Iceland Pure Spring Water, for supporting us and doing what we do. And hopefully you guys that are listening will go out and find some of that water and buy some. So let's get right into the next segment of our show. MLS expansion eras. Let's kind of break it down, right? You had the initial start in 1996. You had the main guys, the original 10, so to say, even though some got folded and moved around. You've got Columbus Crew, DC United, New England Revolution, New York, New Jersey Metro Stars, a.k.a. the Red Bulls, Tampa Bay Mutiny, who do not exist anymore, Colorado Rapids, Dallas Burn, who's now FC Dallas, Kansas City Wiz. Yeah, that was the name of the team. It was just the Wiz. It wasn't like, Kansas City Wizards and we're going to be cool and have like a nickname for these guys of the Wiz. No, it was the Kansas City Wiz, who eventually turned into the Kansas City Wizards /rebrand / another rebrand into Sporting Kansas City, who they
I
are
still
now.
maintain that the Wiz and even now Sport in Kansas City have some of the coolest jerseys throughout the history of MLS. That's my own personal take on it, especially as a 12-year-old watching Preki run around with a rainbow jersey on.
Yeah, those old ones, man, they were badass. I mean, there was this blue jersey with this huge rainbow on it. Yeah, that was cool. Los Angeles Galaxy and San Jose clash. Now the San Jose Earthquakes, even though there was a lot of movement, the San Jose clash went to Houston, and then lots of crazy movement. So that's your original 10, right? Those are the front runners. You really only have Columbus, DC, New England, Colorado Rapids, and LA Galaxy that are exactly the same, right? So they have not changed one bit. They're exactly the same as they were when they came into the league. Well, badges have changed slightly. The Galaxy have changed. They've done some rebranding. The Crew have done rebranding as well.
Yeah, the
DC
Crew
United
really
is still.
the
What's that?
Crew really changed the brand because they had the 3 construction workers with the crossed arms and the hard
Yeah,
hats on. That
yeah,
was their whole
yep,
thing, and now they've got more of the like a city flag type of look going to it. But
right.
DC has changed a little bit. They have maybe 2 years ago, 2 3 years ago, I want to say they updated the eagle a little bit.
Huh,
So it's the same basic design, but just kind of
right.
touched up. I think it's like how the Miami Dolphins just kind of modernized the Dolphin at
Yeah,
one point. That's
yep.
to me the same thing that DC United did.
Okay. So then we roll into 1998. You get 2 teams brought into the league: Chicago Fire, who are now the Chicago Fire FC, but as of like last September, they were still a Chicago Fire. And then the Miami Fusion. So then that Florida, they were trying to add more base into Florida there, and Florida didn't work. 2002, Miami and Tampa. So the team brought in 98, the team brought in 96. Folded, gone. It's funny for me. I came into the league around 2007 with Toronto FC. And, I was kind of pissed that those teams got folded because those were great locations for me to watch a TFC road game. And in 2007, there were no TFC road games anywhere in the Southeast. There wasn't Atlanta. There wasn't Orlando. There wasn't anything. So I had, there was no way I was getting to a road game. I had to go up to Toronto to catch a game. So 2002, those teams go, and there was an interesting article that was out there around how MLS had lost $250 million in their first 5 years. That's a lot of money. And I think that's something where a lot of these newer leagues in the United States, these football really pertains to American football, like XFL, USFL, whatever, all these damn crazy leagues that have folded. Maybe not arena football because they were around a while, but some of these other leagues that have been around, they come in, they play 1 or 2, maybe 3 years, and then they fold because they're losing so much money. MLS lost that money too, but they stayed at it. They had the money, they had the investors, they had the backing that said, hey, we've got a great product here. We have a plan for the future. We're not making any money now. We're losing money hand over fist, but this is going to turn around. They stuck with it. And now it's all history. So 2005, Chivas USA comes into play,
Right.
based out of LA, as well as Real Salt Lake. Those guys come into the league. 2006, San Jose Clash moves to the Houston area.
Here, real
For the
quick,
Houston
Mike.
Dynamo. Yeah.
So, it kind of bummed me out when Miami and Tampa folded, if only because those were the teams that had Carlos Valderrama playing for them, and he was one of my favorite players to watch when he was playing with Colombia, especially in World Cup '94. Watching him here in the United States, and then seeing him play with these MLS teams at the end of his career, like he was so creative in the midfield, like the way he could thread the needle with his passing, plus one of the greatest soccer haircuts of all time. So I think that'll be what Miami and Tampa are best known for, is that they gave Carlos Valderrama a platform here in the U.S. And what I didn't know until I just looked it up is then after they folded in 2000, or actually right before they folded, so maybe they knew it was coming. He played his last season with the Colorado Rapids, the 01-02 season. So,
interesting.
Yeah, a little, Carlos Valderrama goes from beaches of Florida to the mountains of Colorado. So that was his last days of professional soccer here in the MLS. So that was just a little moment there.
Okay, yeah, because that was all I remembered was the hair. I never followed MLS pre TFC. So yeah, I mean, really, I started paying attention in 2006 once once they got announced to have a team, and once any of our true listeners who have been there from day one know how I got involved in the sport of soccer when I broke my leg, ankle, and foot and was laid up for 30 days. Watching every single game of the World Cup in 2006. So now moving into 2006, San Jose moves out to Houston Dynamo. Houston wins some cups right away. That was a very interesting thing for them. 2007, Toronto FC comes into the fold, really changes the game from that point. And I know I'll take some flack from some of the, diehard DC United fans and San Jose fans and whatever that were there in the supporters sections. Good on you. But once Toronto came into the league, it really changed the environment, the atmosphere of an MLS stadium, because you had Columbus Crew who had a soccer-specific stadium, but they didn't have that feel. You had the Chicago Fire that at that point had moved into Toyota Park. They weren't playing in Naperville anymore. They weren't playing in a huge Soldier Field in the beginning days of the league. You had a team who built their own stadium, and maybe not built their own stadium because they had the Canadian national team behind it and the CSA was behind it, whatever. But they had a soccer-specific stadium built on the old Exhibition Stadium grounds, and it was a true soccer environment, right? You had fans from England, you had fans from, all these other, these real soccer knowledgeable fans that they were standing, they were cheering, they were singing, and they were doing that from right in the get-go. And that really changed the league. It was funny. I was watching the replay of the Chicago Fire Toronto FC match from 2007, the first win and the first goal for TFC. And Max Bretos, who was the broadcaster for Fox Soccer Plus. And I actually had Fox Soccer Plus at that time and was watching that game with Max Bretos. And I can't stand his commentary. It's horrible. But listening back on it now, it was like, he's like, wow, this environment, it's like something we've never seen before. And it's true. And now a lot of MLS fans don't understand it because they see it now in LAFC and the Seattles and, Atlantas and all these other, organizations who have that atmosphere now. That wasn't around back then. And Toronto really brought that into the league because, yeah, there were the DCs, there were the FC Dallases, the San Jose Clashes who had that small section who was there. And you had maybe 100 or 200 of them that were part of that. But it wasn't the whole stadium. And that's what Toronto FC had. And, so then in 2008, San Jose got the team back because they realized they screwed up by moving them out to Houston and put them, back in Buckshaw Stadium there, which is basically a high school stadium. Let's be serious. And then you get Seattle in 2009. We all know about Seattle and the successes that they have had at CenturyLink Field, Quest Field, whatever you want to call it. Philly comes into the league in 2010, followed by Vancouver and Portland. So really that 2009 to 2011 was kind of that next step in the process, right? Because you had Seattle come in that really had that fanfare and that environment and that atmosphere. And they brought in the Cascadia rivals as well. So you got Vancouver, who ended up moving into BC Place, who really isn't quite as good as Portland as far as atmosphere goes, but it's still a damn good atmosphere. And then you've got Portland at Providence Park. We all know how great that is. So that really kind of opened things up there to bring in that Cascadia side of things that's been around for a long time with the USL and whatnot.
And that's what I was going to say, Mike, is you saw the early expansion from the Fire in Miami in '98 through kind of Toronto, San Jose, like over that decade. These weren't areas that had either USL teams or pro teams. I mean, Chicago, they had the Chicago Sting, and some other teams in the area. I can't remember if they ever played in the old NASL or not, but they did have some like professional indoor soccer teams as well. I know Rockford had a semi-pro team for a little bit. Growing up in Rockford, I used to go to Rockford Raptors games all the time. But like now when you get into Seattle, Vancouver, Portland, Montreal, these were teams and cities who have had history for decades in American soccer, going back, even pre-NASL at sometimes. And finally, now they're able to get their teams into the highest level of the new American soccer model. And to me, that really is what cemented not only those clubs, but just the huge appeal of the MLS. Because prior to 2006, 2007, you still were kind of wondering, like, is anyone really going to pay attention to this league? Is it ever going to make it to the big time, or is it just going to be like I don't know, like a AAA baseball thing that people follow occasionally when they want to see who the next big thing is?
Right.
Is it going to end up being on like the college level, or people going to follow college sports more than Major League Soccer? Getting these historic soccer cities in the Northwest into the MLS family, if you want to call it that, just really it helped the league grow up. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. That was probably the turning point. When you look back at it, the turning point of MLS was really 2007 through 2011. When Toronto FC, San Jose, Seattle, Philadelphia, Vancouver, and Portland came into the league. 2012, Montreal. So they added some more flavor there to, the league. It was funny as a TFC supporter, I noticed that in the beginning, TFC was playing the Canadian Cup, the Canadian Championship, against a USL Montreal side, a USL Vancouver side. I had even been to a Vancouver game while they were at the USL and won the championship of the USL at that time. And it was just a matter of time before those clubs came into MLS, just because there was such a rivalry with Toronto, and Toronto had done so well when they came in. So Montreal comes in. Then in 2014, Chivas USA folds. Chivas USA was a joke on the field. I mean, that team was bad. It was they brought in like Nigel Rio Coker or something after he left Vancouver from a decent career in the Premier League. But the team was horrible. There was nobody in the stands. They had literally had maybe 1,000 people at each game. So then apparently there was some series of discrimination lawsuits against ownership that you put in the notes there, Nick. What did you see on that?
Yeah, well, that was just kind of an off the cuff mention in the one ESPN article I was reading about it. It's like the Chivas folded because of poor performance, low attendance, and a series of discrimination lawsuits against ownership. So, to me, Chivas never felt like a serious club in MLS. We were trying to build something uniquely American with the MLS, and to me, Chivas was something that came in from Liga MX and just said, hey, maybe we can grab a few bucks and expand our brand here. And they never took MLS seriously. And if you know anything about Chivas in Liga MX, that club, I don't know if they've changed this policy, but as of a couple years ago, they only signed players of Mexican descent. They wouldn't sign any international players. They only wanted to sign players from Mexico or who could eventually play for Mexico per FIFA rules. So I feel like a lot of that came into their club in MLS. Plus, they were playing in LA, and you already had the LA Galaxy there, who has been cemented with fans since the beginning of the league, and now you're trying to bring this totally foreign playing style, franchise look, everything to it to LA, and there was just no fan base for it. Maybe you had a lot of Chivas Guadalajara fans, a lot of Chivas Liga MX fans there, but they just seemed out of place from the start, and it didn't surprise me that in just 9 years this club folded. Did they win an MLS Cup though somewhere in the mix there?
No,
I feel like maybe they had like
No.
one good season or
No,
something.
they did have a good season. I know they made the playoffs, but they did not win an MLS Cup. It wasn't even close. And then they got taken over by MLS, right? So the Mexican ownership group got booted out of the league somehow, some way. I can't remember exactly why, but then MLS was running the operations. So it was like, it was like, all right, we're just going to keep this thing afloat as long as we can for the fans, and then we're going to shut it down, all while they were looking for the LAFC, who I'm sure there's not a ton of people out here that are listening to us right now that can name the colors of that LAFC team when it was announced by MLS.
I don't think I can, Mike.
Really? Okay, so we're going to put this out there. So YouTube fans that are watching, let us know in the comments. Podcast guys, shoot us an email or go find this on the podcast. What were the colors of the LAFC team when they were announced by MLS ownership group, which was, as you noted in the notes, was like the same week they folded? Write it down. Let us know, because I'm not going to put it out there. And we'll see if we got any true diehard people out there, because I remember those colors. I remember exactly what it looked like on the website when they shut that thing down. Nick, I know you're looking stuff up
I'm
right
looking
now.
right now, man.
And
Ooh,
so anyways, let's
it.
move right on to the next one.
If it's what I found, Mike, I'm certainly glad they changed things up. But hey, real quick, if people are curious, man, go look up the list of notable former players of Chivas USA. It's quite the list of players, man. Juan Agudelo, Jonathan Borstein, Brad Guzan, Sasha Kleshin, Jesse Marsh, John O'Brien, Heath Pierce, Ante Razov, Ale Moreno even. Here's one for you Chicago fans out there. Rafael Wicki, current coach of Chicago Fire, played for Chivas USA in 2008. Yeah. So there's quite the list of people who played there. And then, hey, man, how about the coaching list? Chivas USA former coaches include Wilmer Cabrera, Robin Fraser, Preki, and Bob Bradley, amongst others.
Yeah.
Like everybody ended up at Chivas and the club failed. So that tells you how ownership.
Yeah, totally screwed that one up, right? So then shortly after that, New York City FC and Orlando City came into the league in 2015. That was kind of like the first wave of expansion that was really, really drawn out, right? The two expansion teams,
right?
Yeah, exactly. The expansion teams played each other in that first game. It was the Fill the Bowl, the Citrus Bowl there in Orlando, the old Citrus Bowl before the renovations. And it was, that was actually a great game, a 1-1 draw where New York City drew it at the death with a free kick. It might have been a penalty. It might have been a free kick. I can't remember. But that one was a great game. 2017, Atlanta United and Minnesota United FC came into the league on totally different ends of the spectrum, right? Atlanta comes out and just is just lighting it up, winning all the time. Minnesota United, this was kind of around the time when we really started following soccer together, Nick, when we were talking about, over our cubicle. Right. I remember talking about that Atlanta United Minnesota game in the snow, and Atlanta went up to Minnesota and dominated 5-0 or 5-1, whatever it was.
I think Minnie maybe pulled one back just to save some face. But it was like the University of Minnesota football stadium. And
TCF Bank Stadium there.
Ridiculous game, yeah.
Right, in the snow, and we're like, all these South American guys, they won't be able to play in the snow. And then they go and just wipe the floor with them, because Minnesota was giving up 6 goals a game at that point.
Yeah.
And then, now Minnesota's kind of pulling it back. They went with the slow build. Atlanta went with the fast build. They've won an MLS Cup. They beat Minnesota in the U.S. Open Cup final just recently. And then LAFC became a franchise, the new team, Black and Gold, which we're all accustomed with now. So they came in 2018, 2019, FC Cincinnati. 2020, Miami and Nashville, which, again, I have to point this out. I feel extremely horrible for the Inter Miami fans with this whole coronavirus thing, man. I mean, I'm dying right now. Nick, I'm hurting, man. Like TFC, they should have had 3 points on the road at San Jose. Then they go at their home opener. They beat a good New York City team with the rookie getting a goal. And I'm just all excited about the season, and now I'm not going to have soccer all summer. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to swim in my pool and not have soccer? What is going on? And these poor Inter Miami fans who, they got to see their team play, which is cool. Just like the Nashville fans, they got to see their team play. But Miami did not get a home game. They have not played a home game. They were 2 days away from getting that home game, and then done. Sorry.
That city's going to erupt.
It's going to be crazy. When they play a game in Miami, / Fort Lauderdale, it's going to get crazy. So I feel the worst for them out of all of the MLS teams that are going through this. But this year, Miami and Nashville coming to the league. Now let's talk about some future expansion teams. Austin FC. and Charlotte come into the league in 2021. So next year, I think people they think Austin and Charlotte, they're thinking, yeah, maybe 2 or 3 years from now. No. Next March, if the season's, well, obviously, who knows? There's been lots of chatter of, are they going to move to a European type season where they play over the winter? It's not going to happen. Personally, I don't never see that happening. But they come into the league
if
next
the
year.
MLS can compete with the NHL as far as ratings goes, and maybe with the NBA as far as American domestic ratings go, I think they would consider it. I mean, no one is ever going to compete with the NFL right now,
Right.
and I would say the MLS as far as attendance, they're and obviously Atlanta and Seattle are pulling a lot of these averages up. But as far as like annual attendance and TV ratings, I don't think the MLS is too far behind hockey and basketball right now. So it wouldn't
No.
surprise me if you see in 5 years when their revenues, when their attendance, when their ratings start competing with NHL, with MLB, with NBA. Maybe you do see them go to the winter season, fall to spring type of thing with a break over Christmas, like these European club seasons do. Then again, I don't know if the European club winters are as bad as playing a winter game in New York or Chicago with feet of snow on the ground. But hey, maybe that's just me being American stupid. I don't know.
I don't know. It could happen, but yeah, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. That's for sure. Just because of the weather and how it plays into it here in the United States. I mean, it can work down in Florida and Texas, even maybe even Sporting Kansas City, but they get a lot of snow as well in the Midwest.
Right.
So it comes into some of these, Chicago's, Toronto's, New York's. How do you play a game? How do fans get to a game in that much snow, right? I mean, lots of different things to talk about there. But Austin and Charlotte come into the league in 2021, and then St. Louis and Sacramento in 2022. So that was kind of like the end of the expansion, right? Because what Garber was saying is, hey, we want to get to 28 teams and then stop. It's those 28, and then we're taking a break. But now they're at 28, and they keep talking about more and more and more. Do we see more teams coming to the league, or is this it?
Well, the money certainly is good, Mike. What's the expansion franchise fee right now? 250 million?
I
350
think it's
million?
close to 350. Yeah,
350 million dollars to for an expansion franchise. And you know what? These ownership groups are happy to pay that
right.
because they know buying into the MLS league model. And again, if you don't know, listeners or viewers, it's not separate team ownerships. The MLS is a single entity,
Right.
and then all the clubs are actually franchises. So they're buying into an extremely viable and profitable entity who, for example, let's go back to 2002. If they do start hemorrhaging cash, well, then the league can just say, "Hey, we're folding a team and dispersing the resources around." Like they can do that. It gives a lot of stability and structure. And on top of it, the U.S. Soccer Federation, whether you like it or not, pro rel for USA type people, the U.S. Soccer Federation is going to keep MLS as the number one tier. And then if they do ever decide to go pro rel or multiple top tiers, it's not like they're going to be demoting people to USL levels. They'll probably split the MLS into MLS East and MLS West, and then just have like a tournament of champions or something like that, for like the top four teams in each can play for the MLS Cup. So this is a long term viable program. So these teams are going to and ownership groups are going to be buying into it. Absolutely, they're going to come up with the money. So yeah, I see it going. I see it growing to 32 teams before Garber's done with his tenure as commissioner. Whether that's in 2 years, whether that's in 10 years, but I do see the league continuing to grow. There's too much money to be made, Mike. Too
Yeah.
much money to be made, and we've heard of USL teams who are planning on it and who if they knew that the league was going to stop at 28 or 30, they wouldn't be making long-term plans. When I was down in Indianapolis last fall and I was talking to guys from their ticket department, they're like, yeah, we're selling season tickets for the next 3-4 years, and guaranteeing people seats at our new soccer specific stadium that we're going to build in the next 4 to 5 years. Like they're already trying to lock people up to do that because they know they need the soccer specific stadium, they need guaranteed season tickets, and then they'll get the MLS franchise. You
Right.
look in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hey, Charlotte just got the bid. You know the Carolinas are a hotbed of soccer, both at the collegiate level as well
Yeah.
as developmental level. The Carolina Railhawks recently rebranded to the North Carolina FC, and their owner is privately funding a new stadium.
That's crazy.
Like
When you told me
there's
about that earlier,
expansion
I was
out
like,
there.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's expansion out there.
there definitely is. I mean, you look at some of these cities that are still out there. Like really, what stands out to me is Las Vegas, Phoenix, Indianapolis. These are big NFL markets.
Hmm.
Obviously with Las Vegas now pulling in the Rams or the Raiders. Um, and the Carolina Railhawks with that type of investment, that's crazy. The fact that we're starting to see these USL sides that we talked about a couple episodes back with Louisville City, it's really starting to turn up now, even in the lower leagues, for these clubs trying to become MLS franchises because it's kind of like getting into the stock market when it's low,
Yeah.
right? You see an opportunity there, and it's proven that you're going to go up. I mean, it looks like it's really going to rise in the future. They've already knocked through that tough part of the 250 million loss in their first 5 years. I mean, we look back at that and say, oh wow, 250 million dollars, that's a lot of money. And when you bring inflation into it, it's probably more than the 250 million. But overall, if you bring another four teams into this league, that's 1.2 billion dollars at the current rate that it is now, which it could go up even more. You could say, hey, let's put a $500 million franchise tag on
Right.
each team, and now it's 2 billion to get from 28 to 32. And who knows? I mean,
Well, that's how
that's
you
what we could be
stop.
talking.
That's how you stop, a nonstop expansion is you just make the franchise fee half a million or a million or half a billion, and okay, maybe people don't want to pay that. But what I
Right.
was just thinking about is you've got places like Raleigh, Sacramento, Charlotte, Nashville. Well, Nashville may be an exception because they've got the NFL team. But if you're, I'm trying to think, gosh, if you're Phoenix, if you're LA, like LA before they got the Knights and the Raiders. Like,
Las
how can
Vegas, yeah.
you I'm sorry, Las Vegas, yeah. How can you develop, like, what can be your big anchor for some major income? Like, we see it here in Chicago, the failing of Toyota Park for the Chicago Fire because nothing ever developed around it. Meanwhile, you've got Wrigleyville, who's just exploding with all the new money that they're bringing in, and Wrigleyville is going to be like its own Cubs themed city. How can you do that when you can't get an NFL franchise? There's no point in starting a new Major League Baseball franchise because you need so much infrastructure for that. Same thing with an NBA team. I feel like ownership is pretty well set. They don't want to make their season any longer or add more teams. They already have a diluted talent pool and players complaining about how long the season is. An MLS franchise is the way to go. So it's worth ponying up 350 million plus for a franchise fee, and the city then getting involved in helping with the stadium and local developments because they're going to be a professional sports team in a town that otherwise has no chance of getting one. And that's kind of my roundabout way of saying all of that.
Okay. So if there's two teams that are getting the next franchises, who are you saying those two teams are?
Well, I'm a little bit of Homer in me is I want Indianapolis to get it. I really hope they do. Indianapolis was been around and they've grown from NASL to USL, and they've risen the ranks of the USL divisions. And I really hope that Indianapolis gets a professional soccer, like a top tier professional soccer franchise. Um, the Hoosier State is a hotbed of soccer. I'd say it's on par with any other state in the country for some of the talent that it can produce. And we're starting to see the Chicago Fire, the Indiana Fire Academy produce a lot of homegrowns for them too. Not to mention the Hoosiers, Notre Dame, as well as all the high school teams that I had to play against growing up myself, who put together a lot of D2 and D1 players. So I'd love to see Indy get it. Mike, who do you think's the other city that is probably going to get the next bid?
I'm torn. I think you split it up, one in the East, one in the West. And I think as far as the East goes, your options are really Detroit, Indianapolis, and the Carolinas. To have that like second Carolina team. I think there's enough rivalry in place with Nashville, Orlando, Atlanta. There's enough teams that they've kind of branched out to the south. I think it would be Indianapolis to try and grow that Midwest branch, because Detroit, I don't see them going near Detroit. That's just a personal opinion that I have. That PDL side that they have there, Detroit City or whatever it is, that is basically like a high tier USL side. That's a PDL side. I don't think MLS wants anything to do with trying to compete with those guys, because they've got the diehard fans there at Detroit City, whatever that, PDL, PDSL, whatever the hell they call it. So I'm going Indy in the East. I think as far as the West Coast, it really comes down to a Las Vegas or a Phoenix. I think the Golden Knights have really turned something special with bringing the tourist in to their team. Right. And the away fans and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if MLS is quite ready to go that route. I think home field advantage means so much to these MLS sides that really kind of having a team that markets to the visiting team isn't quite what they're looking for. So I think Phoenix would probably be the answer. You've got Phoenix touches all those other, they've got the Suns in the NBA. They've got the Cardinals in the NFL. They've got the Coyotes, even though they've been league-owned for however long. I think that's probably the only thing holding back Phoenix from getting a franchise in MLS, is the fact that the Coyotes have been league-owned for however long. Their stadium, their arena is league-owned, right? There's been some issues there. So whether that's just based off of management or whether that's based off of, the fact that fans aren't going there, I don't know. But I think Phoenix would probably get that team. So Phoenix and Indy are my two picks for the next franchises, East and West.
Right. By the way, Detroit plays in the NPSL, National Premier Soccer League, so they have not joined the pyramid, so to speak. But anyway, Mike, thanks for a great episode. Somehow, with no games, we still managed to talk for an hour. Listeners and viewers, thank you for staying tuned. Again, you can find us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Redbubble. Please reach out to us. Let us know what you want to hear. Additionally, thanks again to our sponsors, Donovan Food Brokerage and Nice Premium Iceland Pure Spring Water. You help us do what we do. And of course, we're open to additional sponsorship opportunities. And with that, we're going to wrap up tonight's episode. Everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and obviously stay tuned for more soccer content. Thanks very much.